Y'all. Let's go ahead and get started. Today we are talking about oral argument tips and resources. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see. Okay, so here's what we're going to be doing today. First thing first, we are going to look at an actual Supreme Court oral argument so that you can kind of see some of the consistencies and the things that you need to know in terms of the mandatory intro and how to respond to interruptions. Then we're going to look at some of the Lexis features that are going to help you stay organized and prepare for oral argument when you get there. Finally, we will look at a great resource for some do's and don'ts for oral argument that should help you as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with our actual Supreme Court argument and what it ultimately sounds like.
Obergefell versus Hodges and the consolidated cases. Ms. Bonato.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court, the intimate and committed relationships of same-sex couples, just like those of heterosexual couples, provide mutual support and are the foundation of family life in our society. Yet the legal commitment, responsibility, and protection that is marriage is off limits to gay people as a class. The stain of unworthiness that follows on individuals and families contravenes the basic constitutional commitment to equal dignity. Indeed, the abiding purpose of the 14th Amendment is to preclude relegating classes of persons to second-tier status.
What do you do with the Windsor case where the court stressed the federal government's historic debt to states when it comes to matters of domestic relations?
States do have primacy over domestic relations, except that their laws must respect the constitutional rights of persons. Windsor couldn't have been clearer about that. And here we have a whole class of people who are denied the equal right to be able to join in this very extensive government institution that provides protection for families.
Well, you say join in the institution. The argument on the other side is that they're seeking to redefine the institution. Every definition that I looked up prior to about a dozen years ago defined marriage as unity between a man and a woman as husband and wife. Obviously, if you succeed, that core definition will no longer be operable.
I hope not, Your Honor, because what we're really talking about here is a class of people who are, by state laws, excluded from being able to participate in this institution. And if Your Honor's question is about, does this really draw a sexual orientation line?
No. My question is, you're not seeking to join the institution. You're seeking to change what the institution is. The fundamental core of the institution is the opposite sex relationship, and you want to introduce into it a same-sex relationship.
2 points on that, Your Honor. To the extent that if you're talking about the fundamental right to marry as a core male-female institution, I think when we look at the 14th Amendment, we know that it provides enduring guarantees, and that what we once viewed as the role of women, or even the role of gay people, is something that has changed in our society. So, in a sense, just as the Lawrence Court called out the Bowers Court for not appreciating the extent of the liberty at stake, in the same vein here, the question is whether gay people share that same liberty to be able to form family relationships.
Hopefully that gave you kind of an idea as to what happens when you perform oral argument. So the first thing I wanted to point out is there's that mandatory intro, and you've probably talked about that in class, but may it please the court. So Madam Chief Justice, may it please the court. And then you typically introduce who you are, which side you represent, and sort of a brief summary of your argument. So for the following 2 points, this is what we're going to prove. You noticed that as soon as she was interrupted, she stopped talking. So that is another thing. As much as you want to finish your sentence or talk over the justice or the judge, you need to zip it as soon as they start talking. They are going to interrupt you. They are going to drone on and on for a little bit like Justice Scalia did, and it's going to eat into your time. So your job is just to circle back as often as possible to that argument that you're making, and also to take any questions that they pose, answer the question. So yes, no, that's correct, that's incorrect, and then tie it back to your argument or distinguish it if it can be distinguished. So you're kind of always trying to get back to that roadmap that you have. Now, I would suggest a couple of things. What you can see here is what I like to call the case grid. The case grid is what helps you know the record. So this actually allows you to pull the cases on both sides of the argument because you do want to know the facts and the rulings for both sides. And we'll walk through how to do this when we are on Lexis. The case summary is a great section to look at. Those head notes, those holdings, that is also useful. And you can copy and paste directly into a case grid. I just made this using Word. You can use Excel, whatever is easiest for you to keep things organized, but having a grid that you can keep with you to refer back to when you're doing oral argument is very helpful. Now, let's take a look at Lexis so that I can show you some of those other tools that I think are going to be really helpful for you in oral argument. So first thing would be your folders. So I'm going to click on the folders link up here at the top. And I would really suggest creating 3 particular folders. So you're going to see mine. I'll open up my oral argument folder. So you create one folder for oral argument. You can do that by clicking this plus sign here and calling it oral argument. I already have one, so I'm going to open that up. And then you'll notice that in my oral argument folder, I created 3 subfolders. So again, once you're inside the folder, you click the add folder and you can create as many subfolders as you want. So we have one here called essential authority, and that's going to be the authority that you are relying on to make your argument. So those are your cases, those are your statutes, those are all of the things that you are citing to make your argument. Then you have other authority. Other authority is going to be supporting authority. So persuasive cases or briefs or motions or law reviews and treatises. So things that are helpful in understanding your argument. And then our last folder is read and distinguished or read and distinguish. So this is authority that you've reviewed, but doesn't necessarily apply to your brief or your motion. So that means those are your opponent's cases. Those are cases from other jurisdictions. Those are cases that go against your argument. And even if you are not relying on them, you need to be able to make an argument distinguishing your case from those specific cases in the read and distinguished folder. So you can also make notes in your folder. You can make those notes as you go. You can add a note here at the top within your folders, but those notes are going to help you. So you can see here that we can view all of our notes. So I've added each section and what each folder has in it. So essential authority supports my side. Read and distinguished, that's the counter authority. Other authority is supporting authority. So you can make those notes so that you can stay organized and kind of keep track of what's what. So as you go, you want to make sure that you're putting the relevant authority in the right folder. Now, let's pull up a case so that I can kind of show you how this works. Now, you want to use the case to both add to your folder and to create that case grid that we looked at. So one way for us to do that is to use copy with cite or to highlight text from a document and copy it. So here, and we could use the procedural posture in the overview. This is a great way to get that mini case brief that we could put in our case grid that's going to tell us kind of what's what. We don't want every head note, but what we would want to do is pull out the head notes that are most relevant to what we are arguing and maybe include those head notes in the case grid. So remember that when we copy text, so let me copy this head note. We could also jump down to the section of the opinion and copy the text from here. And then we want to go to copy quick or copy advanced. Under format, standard is the blue book. So we can click apply. And then we can copy that text with the citation. So that's going to help us keep track of where it appears in the document that we're putting in our case grid. So copy with cite is a great way to do that. You can also use copy with cite up here. So copy citation, You can format it standard or Allwood, depending on what your school uses. Click apply, and then you're going to see that there as well. So then you just copy it and put it in your case grid. So that is a great way to kind of keep track. You would want to add it to your folder where it goes. So we'd click that folder icon up here, and then we choose a folder. We could scroll down to oral argument, and we'll see we have subfolders here. And let's say this is our essential authority. So we'll click save, and it puts it in that relevant folder. Once it's in a folder, we've got, we could link to this page and put that in our notes, but we'll be able to access it from our folders the next time. Okay, let's talk about a couple of other things. Shepherd's. So I said this a lot when you were first doing your motions or your briefs, but Shepherd's is both a sword and a shield. So if you find a case that supports your side of the argument, so it says exactly what you want it to say, using Shepherd's positive treatment, and remember, Shepherd's is the only service that has positive treatment. Using that positive treatment is going to help us find other cases that have held similarly or follow this case that agrees with us. So we'd use Shepherd's there to bolster our own argument. On the flip side, looking at any negative treatment of a case that supports us is going to show us cases that have criticized, distinguished, or negatively treated our case. Those are probably going to be the cases that our opponent is relying on. So we want to use those just to be aware in that read and distinguished folder of what's going against us. Now, again, flip the script a little bit. Let's say you find a case that goes against your side of the argument. It does not support your argument. Using Shepherd's and looking at the negative treatment or cautionary treatment of that case is going to show you cases that have taken it down or distinguished it in some way. And that helps us if that case is not on our side. So use Shepherd's for both of those things. Now, if we Shepherdize a document, you have something else called the Table of Authorities. The Table of Authorities within the Shepherd's report is every case that your case cites to. So we're usually in the Citing Decisions tab. If we navigate to Table of Authorities, that's going to show us all of those cases that Bakke cites to. And now we can see also what Bakke does with that case. So Franks, looks like Bakke is distinguishing that case. We've got a bunch where it's just citing to it. If we see the green square, that indicates that it follows that opinion. So we want to pay attention to what Bakke is really relying on or distinguishing within the Bakke opinion. Now, sometimes we get to cases that Bakke is either citing to or relying on, but may have a red stop sign. So the Table of Authorities is a good way to expose any underlying weaknesses in our argument because we want to make sure that it's not citing to that case for the reason that was treated negatively. So we want to know, why is Bakke citing to it? Are they relying on it? Are they following it? And if so, how is that case later treated? Because that becomes important. So this is kind of like your backdoor secret weapon to take a look at the Table of Authorities and see what cases is my case relying on or my opponent's case relying on, and how have those cases been treated subsequently in the law. And that's what the Shepherd signal next to that case is going to tell us. So we'd want to take a look at the Table of Authorities just to help us out even more. You have another tool within Shepherd's that's called Shepherd's at Risk. So let me show you an example of Shepherd's at Risk so you can know it when you see it. Okay, so when you pull up a case that has the at-risk indicator, so I'm going to show you this example so that you can see it. This is a great way to know if the case that you're looking at is relying on authority that has been subsequently overruled. So a lot like the Table of Authorities, we're in an opinion and we can see this at-risk icon over here on the right-hand side. So when we click on at risk, it's going to show us that there are two passages in this decision that have been undermined because they rely on an overruled prior decision. And it's going to point that out to us And it's even going to show us which cases overruled the authority in this passage. So at risk is something that you want to pay attention to if you see it in your opinion, whether it's in your opinion or your opponent's opinion. You want to know, am I going to rely on something that's resting on an overruled opinion, or is my opponent relying on something resting on an overruled opinion? So at risk is a great tool for that. And there is more info on that in the handout. Okay, so last thing that I think is really helpful are your Shepard's alerts. So when you Shepardize a document, and we'll use Dura as an example, there is a bell icon at the top of your Shepard's report. So we can see it up here. We can also see, if we didn't notice before that this case was at risk, we'd be able to see it here. So the bell icon actually allows us to keep tabs on this case so that if something changes, particularly before oral argument, we'd get a heads up about it. Now, when I was a 1L, there was a case that was really important that we were all citing to for one reason or another, no matter which side we were on. That case actually got overruled by the United States Supreme Court while we were doing it. About half of our class set an alert and the other half, not so much. I was in the not so much category. So when it came time for the moot court competition, the school-wide one, a bunch of people knew about the overruling of the case, and then a bunch of us did not. So it was a lesson learned for sure. Shepard's alerts are a great CYA tool. They do the work for you so that you don't have to constantly re-Shepardize everything that you've cited to. So a good rule is if you're hanging your hat on a particular case or statute or part of a case or a statute, you want to set a Shepard's alert on it so that if something changes, you'll get a heads up about it. So this is showing us under the overview tab that we're going to monitor Dura. Under the monitor tab, you can choose to only monitor it for negative treatment, or maybe you want to see the positive treatment too. Under the deliver tab, this is where you can change the duration. So the default is 2 years from the date, which is a little excessive when we're in law school. So maybe we just want to change it if we know that we're going to be done with our briefs or our motions by, I don't know, May 7th. We could go ahead and just choose our end date there. You can change your frequency. So I typically recommend weekly, but if you are participating in a oral argument competition or doing it for class, you may want to change it to daily or business daily as you get closer to that competition date or as it's ongoing. The other thing that I'm always going to recommend is that you choose email plus online and put your email in the box. Once you do that one time, it'll save your email and you won't have to do that again. And then check the box that says send a notification only when a change occurs. So if nothing changes with the law that you're citing to, you won't get an email. It's only going to email you if something new cites to it negatively or positively. Once we're done, we just click create alert. And what Lexis will do is re-Shepardize that case or statute, because you can do this for statutes and lots of other things as well. So it'll re-Shepardize those and send you an update if something changes. So your alerts are always available from those 3 dots. They're the first option. And then from here, you can always edit, delete, or pause your alerts. So if you want to change the frequency or you want to update it, you can do that from the alerts in the menu up there at the top. Last thing I want to show you, there is a great resource called The Art of Advocacy Appeals. So this is the alert screen. This is telling us kind of what's what. So if we wanted to get rid of it or we didn't want to monitor this anymore, then we can always edit and change it from there. So the last thing I will show you, in the search box, you just start to type in Art of Advocacy. And I have a link to it in the handout as well, which should be helpful. But Art of Advocacy Appeals is your first option. So when you click on that beneath the search box, it's going to show you the table of contents for that source. And it mostly talks about the written argument, but you can see that chapter 3 is all about oral argument. So it talks about, tips on public speaking. My favorite chapter is actually do's and don'ts for oral argument, where it goes through like what to do when you get interrupted, conclusion and rebuttal, kind of setting aside time all of that stuff. And then you even get some model oral arguments that I think are really helpful. So this whole source is a great one, especially when this is something that we've never done before and it might be a little bit scary. I also have some of my favorites in that handout. My very last tip is I think it's really helpful to dress professionally, even on Zoom, if that's the way that we're doing oral arguments these days, just because it makes you more confident. And I think anytime we feel even just a little bit more confident, it definitely helps our results and our demeanor throughout that process. Okay. If you need any help with anything, I am here to help you guys. So please just reach out. Don't hesitate. There are no stupid questions. I hope that you found this useful. And I'll stick around for just a couple minutes in case anybody has any last minute questions, but otherwise y'all are free to go. And I hope you're staying warm and dry and have a great rest of the day. Bye y'all.